Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me live today on International Women's Day. I'm here with a really special friend and a colleague, Freda Wilson. Welcome, Freda.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So Freda is joining us. Freda, I'm having a brain thing. Where are you joining us from? You're from Atlanta, right?
No, I'm on the West Coast. I hail from San Diego.
And I know that, but thank you very much because San Diego is my favorite city. And thank you so much for joining us today. And for those who
Absolutely.
are joining me live or on the replay, I'm Laura Lee Lyon. I'm the Client Attraction Queen. I love sharing with entrepreneurs how to work with their client attraction factor. Are you attracting or repelling your ideal clients? And that's from my therapy background and master's in body language messaging. So today we're going to talk about divorce, and Freda is an expert and an expert in the field, and really Freda's been is a certified life and relationship coach. She's a national public speaker. You're also a Christian minister. You're involved in community development and nonprofit management, and you are, now I have to ask you how many times an Amazon best-selling author. So you have two, or there are more on the way?
I have two.
Yeah, very good.
We're on the way. We'll see about that.
Right. And she's international best-selling author of Healing the Wounds of Divorce and Building Relationships That Last. And in her work with people, she works with divorce care services, relationship and dating services, and marriage support, pastoral care, Christian guidance and discipleship and spiritual guidance. And Rita, you're an amazing woman. I want to honor and acknowledge you today on International Women's Day. You are like so many brilliant women that you I can see the stream, the line of the work that you're in, and it shows a lot about how compassionate you are, how much you care, about families and individuals. Yeah. So we're going to talk about how divorce affects the children today. There's a lot of dynamics in there. But Freda, first of all, tell us how you came to be doing this line of work, because there's a lot of different areas of relationship that you could have gone in, but divorce, and that is a primary theme for you.
Yes, thank you for the question. Well, about 20 some odd years ago, I went through a very painful public divorce. My previous husband and I were pastors of a mega church, over 1,000 members, and it was the most devastating experience I could have ever gone through. I felt like I was being swallowed up in a community of people. I lost all my friends during that season because most of my friends were in the church community, and I pretty much found myself by myself. And so it was so painful. I went through a season of depression, actually, and had to get support and help with that. And during my journey, the Lord spoke to me and said He wanted me to share my story. And this is maybe 15, 16 years later, because the season was right. My children were grown. And so I could move forward a little more without impacting their lives. So, because of my pain, all that I went through, some of the suffering that I didn't have to go through if I had gotten help sooner. So, it's been my ambition to share with others the difficulties that I went through and then help them heal and rebuild their lives and give them hope for the future, because there is hope. because currently I've been with my current husband for 20 years now,
Mhm.
and life is really grand.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of statistics out there, and they say, oh, divorce rates are down. That is because marriage rates are down.
Yes,
People aren't
absolutely.
quitting, right?
That's right.
There's a flavor of kind of a climate of non-commitment, and it really is. Our society is so. I call it the drive-through pandemic, because it's like we want it instant, we want it fast. Drive through. Oh, that's no good. I'm done. I'm gone. I don't have to. I don't have to take this bad service.
Right, right.
Yeah, I hear you. That's
You're right. The marriage rate is down, and that's because people are, for the most part, they're cohabitating. So those relationships are not getting into the statistics.
mm-hmm,
So people choose
mm-hmm,
to live together and not make the formal commitment through the government.
right.
So the result of that is there are fewer divorces because those relationships that break up aren't recorded. So it
Right.
appears we're doing better, but not so much.
Right. And add online dating. Now, I have 30-year-old daughters that grew up in that's the norm for them.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that that's not what I have to experience, because I have so many friends who I've watched go through this. Now, I'm married to my lucky number three. And I'm
Congratulations.
his lucky number three. And after 26 years, it's a lot of work.
Yes.
I say we were in honeymoon for the first 15 because he worked away from home.
Ah, okay.
And people used to feel bad that he worked away and I was alone, but it's like that's what launched my career.
This is what worked out for you.
Yeah, well, he says today too, he still occasionally works away from home. He says, I can always tell when it's time for me to go back. He said to me one time, he says, I don't speak pots and pans. Could you just tell me what's on your mind?
Oh, that's cute.
That really hit it like bang on, because that's so much of the struggle is the communication, right? And
Yes.
that's a big part of why our marriage is so strong. Actually, both of us are therapists. I always say he
That's
had to
cute.
go. He had to go into therapy to live with me.
Oh, that's cute.
I am a lot of work, and that's okay.
Whatever works, right? Oh my goodness.
So, yeah. So what are so I'm going to suggest that it's the communication that's a big challenge. But what leads to the communication breakdown, and especially for the children, like how does that look? That's kind of big picture, but I'm going to let you dive in.
Yeah, well, usually the breakdown in communication is the result of other issues in the relationship that aren't being addressed. So then the communication begins to fall apart. So if we don't address things in the relationship early on, then they begin to linger, and then you get the side effects of whatever the concern is. For example, you never help with the children. So then maybe bitterness or resentment gets to set in and frustration. So then you might start lashing out or communicating in a way that's not so warming. You could begin name calling or slamming doors, things of that sort. So if you don't address the issues at hand, then communications also fall apart. And there is the idea of no communication, which is a communication problem. So
Oh.
that's kind of how this problem with communications evolves.
Mhm. Tony
By
Robbins. Oh,
issues. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No.
I heard Tony Robbins use a term that just nailed it too. Stacking. He says women stack. He says because it might have been 15 years ago that you did that one thing, but she remembers it. And then on
Yeah.
top of it, she remembers this and this and this. And it's like, that's me. Because it's not just one thing. And then it's the boiling point. And that's when I go into
Yeah.
speaking pots and pans or cupboards, like you say.
And there's a joke I heard some years ago where the husband told the therapist, oh my God, what am I going to do? My wife is historical. My wife is historical. He said, what do you mean hysterical? He says, no, she keeps bringing up the past. So again, the past building up and not being addressed is the point. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So
deal with things at hand and you'll be a lot happier in your relationship.
yeah, when my husband and I were getting married, he was 40 and I was 30, and we went through the marriage counseling, and it was actually his brother-in-law married us. Uh,
Okay.
So and that's the only way he would do it is if we went through that. And I thought, well, we're kind of past that, and it's like, no, he asked questions that brought up stuff, and in the long run, I thought, geez, they should there should be more of that up front than making the divorces so difficult. Make it harder to get married. And I think inside of that, that creates some of that sacredness that is,
Yeah.
the ritual and all of that. And if there could be more about the ritual and ceremony, the sacredness rather than the big white dress and the ceremony.
I agree. And, premarital counseling is something to be considered because it really helps you work through or discuss things that you may not have thought of to prepare you for marriage. And
Mhm.
so that was very wise of your husband and your brother-in-law and yourself to do that because it just kind of helps kick off the marriage in a very positive way. So yeah, I highly recommend that. In fact, I am a certified premarital counselor, and I find that it's very helpful for couples who dare to do so.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So let's dive into the kids and why this has such a special place in your heart.
When people go through divorce and they have children, that is something that really has to be addressed in a very delicate and non-selfish way. Children generally think that they're the reason their parents get divorced. And so that begins to affect them emotionally and mentally. And then when there's conflict and confusion between the parents, when it comes to visitations, the lack of money, the I'm sending too much money, just all of the chaos that happens oftentimes with parents impacts the children. And I always say, and even in my book, I say, do what's best for the children, even if you don't agree with some of the decisions your ex is making. For example, women, we tend to be very protective of our children. And so we don't like our children being introduced to a lot of different people who will be caring for them. So the husband may have a girlfriend that he introduces to the children prematurely. Well, a lot of women get upset about that, but then that causes conflict because at the end of the day, you can't control what the ex is doing, even though we want to. So if the person is not harmful to the children, is not doing anything that could harm them, then the best thing for us to do is to let it go and to let our children be at peace. Because if we stir up the problems and that we're having, then it hurts the children. And what ends up happening is all of the conflict and the confusion that we have with the breakdown of the marriage impacts how they view relationships when they get older. So it's so important to deal with the children at every stage of the breakdown.
That is such a great point. And I'll just share in my situation. I had little girls, and in the absence of their father, I left the marriage. And I thought the best thing I could do is I just won't talk about him. And
Mhm.
2 years later, almost 3 years later, when I'm getting engaged, and I didn't date with I did, but not around the girls. They didn't see any action, which I think
Okay.
is there's too much action that the kids see these days, even
Yes.
then. That was something that I thought I could protect them from. And in the absence of a story for them, my oldest, she was 4, she says, 4 or 5, she says, Mommy, maybe if you were nicer to Daddy, he'd come home. I was shocked, actually,
Mm,
that that I realized then, and and again, in the absence of the story about where the other daddy went. I said, I'm marrying, and this is what's going on. And she was good with that. She liked him, but she said, "But what about Daddy?"
yeah.
And I thought, I just so I just always said to them, Daddy'll have his story, I have my story, and you're going to have your story. So
Yes.
there was conflict, but that was the best way that I knew to handle it. I had a lot of friends that weren't doing a very good job with what the kids were seeing and experiencing. And
Mm.
my kids, I honestly today I'd say that they grew up quite balanced
Oh, well,
because
praise God.
they didn't have the emotional stuff that a lot of kids have to deal with because mom and dad are fighting.
Yeah,
We were fighting, but I kept it away from them. Um,
that's
so
right.
yeah, well, it was. I'm not saying I'm better than anyone. It was just that and that was my choice, and So what I heard you say was to give the kids tools. Give the kids tools so that when you're not with them, that that they'll be okay. I think that was the
Absolutely.
thing.
Because children will communicate to you when they're unhappy or if something's wrong. And we don't have to really badger them or inquire, oh, well, what's going on over there or who's over there, who's visiting. All of that creates kind of angst and it puts the children in the middle
Yeah,
of the conflict, which is very uncomfortable for them because the most important people in their lives are falling or their relationship is falling apart and they're right in the middle of that. The other thing I see too is oftentimes mothers withhold the children from the father when finances are not being provided. And I
yeah,
understand the frustration there, but here again, the children suffer when they don't have their fathers in their lives. And even though the lack of child support that's coming in and our frustration with the lack of support that we desire, we still have to think about the children. They still love their father and we don't want to project or an image of him that he's a deadbeat or that he's just no good. Because if you have male children, that can affect how they look at themselves as they grow up. So the bottom line here with the children is you have to remember that we are preparing them for a life in the future. And one of the quotes I heard, I believe it was Frederick Douglass says, we often are preparing our children for the future, but then we forget that they need to be trained and loved right now, today. And so we're looking
beautiful.
for the future, but not dealing with the right now, which is so important because it impacts their future. So, like you mentioned, the tools, some of the tools are just they will communicate when something's wrong, whether verbally or non-verbally, and we can try to tune into those non-communicative hints that they give us to
Mm.
let us know if something's wrong.
Well, and if whichever party is bad mouthing the other to
Yeah,
the children will become defensive
yeah.
against you. And I often have a lot to say, so I really had to work on that part of me because and as your children get older and they have a voice, they will tell you.
Oh, yes, yes, they will. You're right. I have a client that I interviewed for the divorce care program that I do, and he, through his childhood, his mother bashed his father a lot. He's in his 40s now, and he's very resentful of his mother because of how she spoke so negatively about his father. So this is something he is still dealing with at the age of 40, where he resents his mother. And it impacts how he sees women.
Yes.
So these are things we don't really think about because we're in so much pain. We're just so in so much disarray, depending on how the relationship broke down. And so we just have to be cognizant of, even though we're hurting, we have to protect the children because we're the only ones who can, basically.
Well, that how you are is what you're modeling for your children and what you've been modeled. Divorce has a root in where you've come from, right? And I marvel at my family and my husband's family. They're very very similar in how they were raised, but how they raised us. But I grew up in a household of women. There's five of them, and there were three boys and two girls in his house.
Okay.
And in our house, there's a lot more gossip. That's yep. And I've never once heard him say anything ever disparaging against any of his siblings. But that's not the case in the house I grew up in. And as and I think you understand what I'm saying, right?
Oh,
It's
yes, I do.
yeah. And I find that to be quite sad. And today on International Women's Day, there was a lot. There were comments in different events I've been in about how, women like let's watch our tongues. Let's
Yeah.
empower each other because this can be bullying. But we're a harsh tongue, a sharp tongue,
Yeah.
all of that. So that is honestly that's lifelong work for me in the relationship with the children. And yeah, so
It
yeah.
is lifelong work because you will have the father of those children in your life forever because there are marriages, there are christenings of the children, there are birthdays. So it's just so much that you have to do or share with each other. So you just can't escape it. And so
Yeah.
it's better to try to build a positive relationship, even if you are in a painful situation. And men do bad mouth women too. I have another client whose husband actually has nothing good to say about her to their
Mhm.
son. And so now the son actually is blaming the mother for him leaving her for another woman. Says, well, you're the reason he left. If you had done this or you had done that, then dad would still be here. Again,
Mhm.
I think one time he told her, why don't you just go kill yourself? Just some harsh, cruel things that he has said. So I just wanted to make sure I had the balance there that both parents can badmouth the other parent. And so it is
Mhm.
incumbent upon both to
Mhm.
really be mindful of the children and try to work together as much as you can. And you will see the reward in the development of your children.
Mhm. So what are some things that you recommend or strategies that people can do themselves or and share with their children? So because it's more than just than what we say and how we talk about each other, but what are some of the other challenges that the kids are going through that could help them?
Well, explaining to them what's going on
Mhm.
based on their age level. And we can always make things positive. Oh, well, you get to have two homes. And daddy and I are very good friends, but we're going to live in separate houses, but we both love you. So you can have those types of conversations with the children to help them understand or deal with the separation better. Another thing is when the custodial parent is really falling apart and they are having a difficult time just dealing with the children, that's time to call for some help. Call your friends, call your neighbors, call your girlfriend, hire somebody to come help with the children so that you can get yourself together mentally and emotionally. I recommend therapy if you are really in a dark place because divorce can take you through so many emotions. It's a really bad grieving process in divorce. And you can get in a very dark place, you can get in a very angry place. And whenever you find yourself in that position, it's time for us to do the work. And some of the work I suggest is relationship coaching, life coaching, divorce care, therapy, sometimes even psychiatry, because sometimes if you get really depressed, then you need to talk to a psychiatrist and maybe just get some medical support in that regard. But taking care of ourselves is really critical, because if we're not 100%, then we can't show up 100% for our children. And that to me is vital. And if you didn't want the marriage, you're the one that's really hurting and suffering the most. And I can tell you, when I was in my divorce, it was really hard. I mean, it took everything I could do to keep myself together. And so I had friends who would just come give me a break. I had my niece who would come give me a break so I can just get myself together so that I can be 100% for the kids. So that's something that I recommend for the mothers or the fathers if you're the custodial parent. The other thing is always communicating with the children, answering their questions as honestly as you can without giving too much detail. The children don't need to know that somebody had an affair. It's not important. It's important to us, and we're angry about it, but it's really not beneficial for them. Or the children don't need to know that you think dad or mom is a deadbeat and they're not good parents. They don't want to know that. They don't need to know that. So be careful and guard what we say to the children. That's another thing that we can do to prepare the children. And sometimes children need to be in therapy, depending on how toxic the relationship is. And, when children grow up in abusive homes, they have a tendency to end up in abusive relationships. So that is so important. If you're physically abused or emotionally and mentally abused, children begin to think that type of chaos and behavior is normal. And so if they find themselves in a relationship that resembles that, that kind of feels normal, and they're more accepting of it. And so there's a statistic that states that if you have a daughter who's in a abusive home, she's 50% more likely to be in an abusive relationship than a daughter who was not in that situation. And that's huge. So again, if we're in abusive relationships and you're not divorced yet, remember a lot of damage is being done to the children in that type of situation. And I do recognize that people are afraid to leave sometimes abusive relationships and their lives are threatened and so forth. So, but that's another topic. But always remember that if you are being abused, then your child is also being abused physically, not physically, but mentally and emotionally. And eventually they may be abused by the parent who is abusive. So important.
Well, yeah, you brought up such a strong point, and you also talked about some of your programs, because that's a resource for people. Would you talk about what that looks like for people?
Yeah, well, I have a program, 8-week program that's called Healing from the Past and Building for the Future. And I help people work through their grief. I help them figure out ways of coping, and there are tools to be used to help us grieve, because when you're grieving in a relationship or from a divorce, you have to face the grief, not try to stuff it down, but you actually work through it and process. So I help women and men, mostly women, work through the grief process. I help them deal with forgiveness, bitterness. People have problems forgiving themselves a lot of times. So that whole process takes a couple of weeks, really, of how to identify the emotions that are most painful and how to process them. And then as we move along, we then talk about, what do you want for the future? Let's dream big. So then we help prepare them for a future as a single, because oftentimes going through divorce, you can't imagine a great life. in the beginning. But as we begin to speak those things, even if we don't feel those things, we can make a plan. And then we also prepare for future relationships and how to know how to choose wisely going into the future. So it's an 8-week program that we work on the healing process. It's very interactive. We deal with forgiveness. We deal with guilt. We deal with how to communicate with your ex, how to handle the children, and then preparing you for your life as a single. And the program has been very beneficial. I'm actually right in the middle of one now, and we're going into the 4th weekend. Some very good people doing some very hard work, and I just can't wait to see the lives that they build moving forward. So that's what I offer in the divorce care arena. And I also do one-on-one. I'm sorry. That's the group program, but I also do work with individuals one-on-one who are not interested in being in a group program.
Sure. And I just want to say hello to everyone who's joining us live or on the replay. I'm here with Freda Wilson, who's a life and relationship coach and specializes in divorce. And we're talking today about what that divorce looks like for the children. So with those courses and programs that she just mentioned, we'll make sure that Freda puts the links in the comments below after the live stream, and do type in any questions that you have, and at any time, even if you're on the replay, and Freda will answer your questions, and we'll make sure that you get a response. And yeah, so let's just talk about what that looks like today with we're very much a blended family. It was the hardest years ever. I thought divorce was one thing, but then when it was like putting it, and it was, and when we were shifting to all these emotions of, especially there were children, older children than mine, and there were more children than what I had, and it was like, wow, all of these emotions, and we survived. It was not easy. It wasn't easy. We have really great relationships today, but it's like there's this block of time when we didn't know how to be together, how to fit in. It was awkward. It was painful. There was lots of things that went on, and I'm really glad that we made it through. But we're very dedicated to the therapy side of our lives, because that's what I do in my business, but not everyone's equipped that way. So it's really there's a lot going on out there for people. What's your recommendation to people?
So with blended families, I'm glad you raised that issue, because people don't think about how complicated it can be to blend a family when you have children coming in from both spouses or from one spouse. You have the whole dynamic of, you're not my mother, you're not my father, you don't tell me what to do. You deal with that. Sometimes you may feel that your spouse is treating their children better than your children. So many different dynamics you have to deal with. Who does the disciplining? Oh my God. Yeah, I went through that, and it's quite interesting. So you have to be mindful and not go in blinded and think it's just going to be, oh, so wonderful. He's going to love my children. I'm going to love his children, and we're just going to be the Brady Bunch. It's usually not like that.
I saw another side of my husband that still comes out today, all these years later. So soft, so soft, but also a little bit of beaten down because he was the the one that was taken advantage of in his marriage. And even though I met him years after their breakup, I was still treated as though I was told the one that broke them up. I was like, well, from the beginning, it's like, I'm not going to win here. So we saw the challenges ahead, and we didn't even think, honestly, we didn't even think at the time to get outside help, because there was so much shame and sadness and all of the stuff from all the other things. And also the internet, today would be different. If we were going through it today, it would be different because there's just so much more awareness out there, right?
Exactly. And hindsight is 2020, right? You mature as you mature, and you have a lot more insight and a lot more wisdom that you bring to the table. So
Mhm.
sometimes we just kind of fumble our way through things. But with programs like today, we are able to give people insight, give people tools, and hope to make it through the difficult times, and to ways to preserve the children, which is really our most valuable asset as they journey into adulthood. So, yeah, blended families, breaking up of families, how do the children interact? How do the spouses, the ex spouses, interact? So much the way my husband really handled it with our children, because we had full majority custody of my children. He supported me in whatever decisions I would make for the children, and he made up in his mind that he would not discipline my children. So I found that to be very helpful, because I don't know how I would have felt if he had been as firm with my children as he is with his own children. So that was wisdom on his part. And he said he took that approach because my children's father was very active in their lives. He said, now, if they didn't have a father, then I would have done things differently. And I think for that, we benefited greatly. And of course, he disciplined his children. That's just kind of the way things evolved. I remember once our kids, we were all at Disneyland, and my daughter and my eldest bonus son were just getting at each other, just getting at it, getting at it. I said, okay, if you do it one more time, I'm going to spank both of you. They didn't believe me, and then I asked my bonus son, I said, "Okay, who you want to spank you, me or your dad?" He says, "You." I said, "Okay." So then they kept getting at it. I turned around. I just spanked them both on their bottoms. Bam, bam. I said, "Stop." And, oh my gosh, he was so mad at me. He just withdrew, and I said, "Well, you said you wanted me to do it." So, again, he was feeling like, "How dare you?"
Yeah. Mhm.
Surprise me, where is this coming from? So that was the first and last time I ever did one of those. But I did do go to your rooms and this kind of thing. But I think the approach my husband took helped me take that position with his children. So it was just a lot more peaceful, because in the beginning, like you say, some of the ex-spouses were not getting along. I'll just put it that way,
Well,
and that made things difficult.
I said sometimes it's like there's a ghost in the house because just the kids are here, but she is too, because there was always, anyways.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's human dynamic. One of my spiritual teachers. He says, even when people are on a healing path, there will always be drama because there's people involved and emotions. You
And
know,
that's a fact. That is a fact.
yeah,
All the work that we do, we still will have, I say we
work
still
to
will
do.
bleed or spill over. Yes, we have to work hard, and it's not gonna be a fairy tale.
Yeah,
There will be hard work, but we all survive it, and we can survive it better if we practice some of the great things that we learn,
yeah.
in the world that we have.
Well, and I think at the end of the day too, like with the kids, I always said to the kid, and I still say today, even though they're 30 and that, at the end of the day, when you lay your head on the pillow, make sure that you are have spoken all your truths, and that
Yeah,
your sister or your siblings know that you love them, because we're not
absolutely.
always going to be here, and you need to know that you've got a support system, but that your siblings are have you in their life too. So And
That's so important. Yeah. That's
yeah,
good advice.
mm,
Great wisdom for sure. And I
yeah.
will say that my children, fortunately, they both like their step parents. It just kind of turned out that way. My boys really love my husband. He's more down to earth, and I'll just say that, and they just relate to him. They relate to their father too. He's more of a leader and out front, so different type of dynamic. And they
Mhm.
love their father. I'm not saying that, but they do love my husband and respect him for the man he is. And they also have a good relationship with their stepmother. So I'm thankful for that. It didn't start out quite that way with some of the situations. I don't want to put blame either way, just fairness. But in some of the circumstances, things were not, as we would have liked. But as time grew, things got better. And I think I was probably more frustrated with some situations than they were. I figured that part out.
Well, yeah, that's right. Like, I can just convolute, because and it comes from a place of caring, Frida. It really does, because it's like, well, what about this? What about that? How did they feel? And so on and so forth. And it's like,
Yes,
oh, and
yes, yes.
oh, didn't even notice. Right?
Exactly. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I remember once I was so upset at something that happened with my eldest son. I held on to that forever.
Mhm.
And then eventually I just had to pray about it and say, God, really take this from me because this is just not healthy for me. And I just started saying, wait a minute, my son has forgiven and moved on. And here I am still stuck. So, that was something I learned from my own child. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
you just forgive and move on. And so
Yeah. When the
I kind
student
of learned a little from that.
when the student becomes the teacher, yeah.
Yes.
So
A lot learned for sure from the kids. A lot to be learned.
yeah. So our children, I've said this many times, our children are our greatest teachers. They bring so many life lessons to us, and it's our responsibility. I always believe that our children choose us as parents, and they bring us a gift. And whether we receive it
Mhm.
or not, that's on us. But the kids are on their own. They'll go and do what they're going to do, and we have such a small window of opportunity to impress upon them the qualities of that are important to
Exactly.
humanity, really. So
That is so important. You're right. We only have a small window of opportunity, and then they're gone to face the world and build their own lives. And what we do in those 18 years becomes
yeah,
vitally important.
yeah.
So, so, so important.
Oh yeah, it's yeah, sure. I remember someone asking me, "How old do you think your children will be when you have the reproductive talk, the sex talk with them?" And this person was really serious, and I gave an age. I said probably 12 or 13, and they were like, "Wrong!" And I'm like, "What?" And I really had to wrap my head around it. Yeah, and that was 30 years ago, I'll just say. And then it just really started this kind of an aha thing for me. It's like, yeah, you have to tell them a lot sooner, because you want to be ahead of it. Because what happened for me at a very young age was that somebody else shared that, and
Yeah.
I was so incensed with her. She came back at me as, "What's wrong with you? You haven't already." And I thought,
Oh, wow.
good on you. Good on you. Yeah, that's something I can't take back or redo, but it won't ever happen again. And I made that was part of my mission as mom. That's when I was a single mom, and I felt really that something had really been stolen from me, but it was a
Mm.
really good lesson. And so I made sure that with my kids after that, it's like, and with his kids too, it's like, they'll sometimes cover their ears, and I know I've done my job. because you heard it here first from a place
Yeah.
of concern, caring, and compassion. That, so and kids have so much to deal with today. Just access to the internet can
Oh
be
my
so
gosh.
damaging. I just can't imagine what parents going through divorce and separation have to deal with, because it is like you've got this outside force that's got a foothold in your relationship too, that you don't
Yeah,
even see it coming, right?
that is so true. And I'm glad you bring that up about having the openness and the freedom to talk with our children about delicate issues. I personally, when I grew up, okay, so no one had that conversation with me. I
I didn't
learned,
either.
yeah, so it was just like I learned from my friends,
Yeah.
in conversations, and it was just never discussed. So what I found is that I was a little uncomfortable talking about it with my children. And thankful, my husband is very liberal and open, and he would be having these conversations. We have 1 girl and 4 boys. Oh my goodness. And okay, so I am a minister, right? And my husband is a believer, but he's talking to the boys some real talk. And I was like, how are you going to tell them? But there we were talking about, what boys do and what girls need to know about what boys do. And so that helped me because I came out of my shell and then began to open up and have those conversations too. But it was very awkward for me because I just never, I was never raised like that. So sex was a very private thing that you really didn't talk about.
Well,
My
I
husband was
even
completely the opposite.
oh, well, that's great. I think not even private, there was so much shame,
Yeah,
around it, right? That it was
yeah,
just, I always got the you better not do, better not
yeah,
do.
yeah,
And it's like, well, what? I didn't, and so yeah, you hear it from the others, and you know, our moms grew up in a different time too, so it
yeah,
wasn't
they do.
easy for them to have that talk. But yeah, I just was really clear with the kids, from a young age, because I started seeing when my kids were in grades 5 and 6, the boyfriend thing was happening, and it's like, that's a bit young, isn't it? And then I started hearing other stuff, and it's like, okay, here's the rule. I had 2 rules. There was no walking the street unless you were going from point A to point B, and there was no boyfriends, and through to grade 12, because
Good.
if you have to have a boyfriend, that means you have to have sex. So we have to have that talk again. But maybe, and they're like, ah, no. It's yeah, because make good decisions. And I thought, because I didn't have the opportunity to make those choices younger in life, just because of lack of information, I thought,
Yeah,
and I have really good parents, but it's like, no, this is not going to be my experience. And I know our kids have they're kind of party girls. They were in their day. But
I
they
hear
have
you.
the information. So I think you make better choices if you have the information, whereas from a lack of,
Absolutely.
you can be more of a victim or a target.
And
So
it's just so important to be open. Like, I can't express that enough to just be open to have the conversations and let them feel comfortable if they want to come to us to talk about those things. And it was difficult for me, but my husband helped a whole lot. And so now I'm like you. I embarrass my kids. Now that, I just really get down in the raw and they be like, "Oh my God, mama."
yeah, oh yeah, the one she does the covering the ears and the la la la,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
yeah, or the um, mom and dad, why don't you guys should get a room, you know?
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
that's I'm really happy that they've had that as a model, that mom and dad express that, and mom and dad talk. And
Yeah.
till from a young age, actually, I felt like they told me too much. And I said to my husband the first time that happened, I said, it was more than what I wanted to hear, but I just kept my mouth shut, because I knew in that moment that that was a big honor being bestowed on me, that my girls came and told me stuff
That's
rather than,
beautiful.
the moms that don't get told. And I'm sure there's lots of stuff they didn't tell me, but I knew there was a level of trust
Yeah.
and openness. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And lucky you. And I found out my boys actually talk more to me than they do to their dad,
mhm.
and more than my daughter talks to me, which is quite interesting. And my daughter's very comfortable talking with my husband. So, but the boys, they come to me with some quite interesting dialogue. And I'm just right there to say, okay, this is how women are. This is what you can do. This is what you shouldn't do. And my daughter is more of a daddy's girl, I think, kind of when it comes to those types of delicate conversations. I don't know if maybe she gets embarrassed when she's talking to me. I'm not quite sure, but at least she goes to somebody. So I'm glad
Right?
about that.
Yeah, yeah. My
Yeah.
husband can feel like, they tell him everything too, and he's quiet anyways.
Okay.
So, Frida, thank you so much for such a great conversation, and we've had some really good laughs and some deep connection around deep topics. These are important issues. So, thank you for making it
Absolutely.
such an easy experience for people listening, and for those who are watching live or on the replay. We really appreciate you being here, and the chances are that you're if you're at this stage, there's something here that you're experiencing in your life too, or this is something
Yes.
that there's some information here. So please do get a hold of Frida, and we'll make sure that those links are available for you. And because it's International Women's Day, Frida, would you share with us someone who's had great impact in your life? And I'm going to say, can't be Oprah, can't be your mom. It's a stretch. I would like you to
Okay.
stretch, and if you would share her with us.
Okay, well, I will say that one of the most prominent female role models in my adult life is Claudette Anderson Copeland. She's actually a minister also, and her husband co-pastored, but she and I became very close when I was going through my divorce. And she just spoke so much wisdom into my life regarding how to handle the grief, because she's a psych major as well as a theologian. So she really understood grief, and she just talked real talk to me and not so much Bible talk, and she just talked about how long I may have to process that, how I could choose my next husband, and it doesn't have to be a preacher. I remember something she said to me, I will never forget. And she said, Frida, you don't need another preacher. You don't have to have anybody that knows the Bible more than you. You want to be with the man who you love, who loves you, and you all connect. You all can go to church and learn how to live for God. He says, that just freed me up, because I was like, oh, well, that's a revelation, because most of the men I encounter, I will be well more advanced in theology. And so I was feeling a little bit uncomfortable. But when she said that, it just made so much sense. I don't have to be my husband's Bible teacher. I leave that to the church, and I just want a companion. I want somebody who will love me, respect me, and we can grow old together. And so that was some profound wisdom that she shared, and I share with other women. So still today, we are very good friends, and we have been friends since I was in my 20s. And I will not say how old I am, but I will say my eldest son is 30. So that gives you some idea.
Yeah.
But she was definitely a role model. And I can't say enough about what she did. She took me into her home.
Mm.
They nurtured me, they supported me, they were friends to me, they were pastors to me. They were just everything I needed at that season in my life, and they've been in my life ever since. Her husband, Bishop Copeland, actually wrote the foreword to my one of my books, which I was very thankful for. So I'm thankful for Claudette Copeland, who is
Mm.
really a very powerful woman. And if you Google her, Reverend Dr. Claudette Henderson Copeland, you will know what I mean. You will hear a lot of good things coming from that woman.
I actually have listened to the two of them in years gone by, so I knew who you were talking
Nice.
about, and
Okay.
yeah, they've been leaders in for oh, geez, I think they probably were amongst the few back then that already had material out in the world, and beyond being on TV, because I'm
Yeah.
sure I listened to some CDs and stuff. So anyways,
Yeah.
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
something I like to do, part of my therapy background is that I'm a psychosomatic therapist and I'm a master face reader. And one of
Cool.
the ways I work with my clients is through the face reading, and because it has to do with the message that you're sending out there from your inner world. And what is it about the package that is you that attracts people to you? And what I see about your face, which is the
Yeah, I'm so
autobiography of
curious.
your life.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, right. Who doesn't want to know? Tell me more, right? 'Cause
I'm like, look at this face.
right? Everything can be explained through your body. When I'm reading the face, I'm actually understanding how you process information, but also it
Hmm.
tells me a lot about the physical body. And I see the shape, the overall shape of your face is very much of the feminine nature, which is the creativity, the nurturing. So you have a form, and it's in your form that is very, you're flexible. People feel like you're easygoing. You have a little bit of clenching back here because you can be biting back your words sometimes.
Okay.
The fullness in your lips shows all about your expression. And it said to me right away is that Frida has a lot to say. So there's
Mm.
the fullness of your lips. Yeah. Um, Often we see people older in life with tight lips. You're the opposite, because people will bear down or keep their secrets to themselves. And you are an open book, Frida. You are an open book and a voice for others, and your mouth says that you speak up for others. So
Absolutely, I do.
mhm,
Wow. Very
mhm.
well on point. Thank
Okay.
you. Well
You're
said.
welcome. Thank you. So, thank you so much to everyone watching, and the links will be in the comments below. And have yourself a fantastic International Women's Day
Yes.
2022.